Alright, howdy y'all. Today we're going to be going over a lefties losing it video, along with some climate change hoax at the end, in high speed, so let's get straight into it. As always, God bless America.
Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. We've been seeing a lot of Bill Maher lately. He has a book to flog, so he's been everywhere, from The View to Gutfeld. Of course, he went on Fox, that's where the audience is. But the more we see of him, the more clear it is that this lefty, who is occasionally sane and lucid, is either wildly ignorant or dishonest. Watch as Megyn Kelly educates him, or tries to, about election denial.
You keep saying sort of I'm nuts because I don't see the difference between the elephant and the mouse, and I'm telling you I identify them differently than you do. Hillary Clinton, of course, is the original election denier. I'm sure you voted for her in 2016.
Well, she's not an election denier.
She absolutely was the OG election denier.
First of all, she came out before the sun had risen to concede the election to Trump.
And then spent the next 4 years saying he was illegitimate. He was an illegitimate president.
Okay, well, first of all, she didn't say he was an illegitimate.
Yes, she did.
You tell me exactly what she said.
She said those exact words repeatedly.
Exact words, that's a quote.
Okay.
Yep, she did. She said those exact words, Bill.
I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president.
Is Bill Maher really that clueless about Hillary Clinton's election-denying ways? Was Maher hiding under a rock for the years she pushed the lie that the 2016 election was stolen, where she helped formulate and spread Russian collusion conspiracies that undermine democracy in the US? Maher is either frightfully ignorant or lying. There are no other options at this point. Let's remind him of some of the things Hillary has said.
I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows, though I know that he knows that this wasn't on the level. I don't know that we'll ever know everything that happened.
Wasn't on the level. So she's literally saying that the election was stolen. Saying it's not on the level. That's literally saying that it was rigged.
But clearly we know a lot and are learning more every day, and history will probably sort it all out.
As I've been telling candidates who have come to see me, you can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you.
There, she used the exact word stolen.
Apparently Bill Maher missed that. He also missed the truth about January 6th, or as he calls it, the insurrection. Let's listen now to some of his paranoid fantasies.
On January 20th, 2025, he'll show up at the White House, whether he's invited or not. And I don't think that's going to be good.
He's going to bomb in if he lost?
Yes. Oh, yeah, bomb is a word I wouldn't even throw around lightly.
Oh, stop it. He's not going to do that.
Right, like there was never an attack on the Capitol.
Oh, I hear you. But he's not going to show up at the inauguration.
Like they didn't show up at the Capitol and break windows and knock down doors and kill cops and chase.
They didn't do that.
And they didn't break windows.
They didn't
knock
kill
down
cops.
They of course did.
No, they didn't.
Who did? They died of natural causes that day.
Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick.
Though they died of natural causes 2 days later.
The medical examiner has determined that he suffered 2 strokes and died of natural causes.
The only person to die in the January 6th riots was Ashley Babbitt. Rest in peace. An innocent, unarmed woman that they murdered. Allegedly murdered. I don't want to get sued.
Yeah, nobody died that day.
Cops.
No, not true. Who?
Okay.
Who?
Oh, I don't remember the names.
They didn't. There was Brian Sicknick, who died later, after the fact.
Megyn Kelly is so much smarter, better informed, and better at her job than Maher. It's frightening. He's the best they've got, though. And the man who prides himself on his depth of knowledge and critical thinking skills kept on embarrassing himself. Here, Megyn schools him on the selective enforcement of the law that saw Biden still classify documents and not be charged.
One actually had the ability to declassify documents and keep them because he'd been the president, and one didn't because he should have been looking at documents only in a skiff while a sitting U.S. senator, and clearly he stole classified documents that he wasn't entitled to and never had the ability to declassify them.
And she's talking about Biden stealing documents when he was a senator that he was not able to declassify, which Trump totally was because he was president.
Yeah. Maybe you know more about that than I do. I don't remember that part of it. And I always don't trust anything I hear until I vet it from the other side, because everybody sort of has their one-sided view of it, and narrative is more important than truth. I know this is the right-wing narrative.
I'm not like that, Bill. I care about facts. I practiced law for 10 years. I want to get the cases right.
You know, conservatives are guilty of the bigotry of low expectations when it comes to Bill Maher. I've done it too. I've praised him and played his clips when he's occasionally said something sensible, something the right has been saying for years. But at his core, he's a delusional Democrat who has spoken of his dream of seeing Gavin Newsom becoming president. Yeah, the California governor, that one. I think fellow traveller Bill Burr summed up.
Gavin Newsom can't even get homeless under control. He's been promising to get homeless under control for the last 30 year. Well, ever since he was elected. It was a problem before he got there. That's what he ran on, fixing the homeless problem, and he just made it worse.
Up Maher nicely during their recent chat.
Most of the you say is not smart. It's just sort of obscure.
It's not obscure to a certain percentage of people. I'm
people that are
not some giant egghead. I'm just
I know you're not that smart.
And Greg Gutfeld had the right idea about Maher, who was on his show earlier this week.
That's the most important thing that's going on in this country. He didn't concede the last election. He's not going to concede this election.
You don't know that.
When everybody said, oh, you smoke too much pot. Turned out I smoked just the right amount of pot.
No, you're just a pothead that doesn't, you only look at the Democrat news, so you're just a puppet.
Right amount. So, Dr. Drew, yes, you're really good at diagnosing mental illness. Okay. What is Bill's problem?
Maybe lay off the pot, Bill. That might clear up the TDS. And let's continue with Lefties Losing It. Here we have a biological man identifying as a woman using their position as the Assistant Secretary for Health in the Biden administration to lecture us about how global warming is disproportionately affecting black people.
Climate change is having a disproportionate effect on the physical and mental.
First off, I don't believe that person should be in office. They should hold no title in our government. If you don't know what gender you are, you're delusional, and there's no way you're going to be able. You should be able to tell anybody else what to do with their life whenever you don't have your own life together. A man acting like a woman, that's all this is a big act. And if you don't know your own gender, you're lost in life. So how can you tell other people what to do? Ridiculous. This is a mental disorder.
Mental health of black communities. Black Americans are more likely than white Americans to live in areas and housing that increase their susceptibility to climate-related health issues. And 65% of black Americans report feeling anxious about climate change's impact.
Joining me now is the author of Fossil Future, Alex Epstein. Alex, your response to that, I would argue climate change policies do disproportionately impact poor people, not black people, poor people, whatever colour they are. Is that how you see it? Because I find it hard to understand how global warming is impacting black people more than everybody else.
I mean, the truth is that, what they're calling global warming, so bad weather, they're saying it's racist, but it's actually classist in the sense of if you're poor, it's hard to deal with bad weather. That's why as the world has gotten richer, we've become much, much safer from climate. We have a 98% decline in climate-related disaster deaths over the last century. So obviously the solution, if you care about susceptibility to climate, is for everyone to get rich, even within the United States, let alone the rest of the world, where most people are incredibly poor, even compared to, the poorest people in the United States. So on the one hand, it's just the exact opposite prescription of what's needed. It's just we need to become wealthier. And then on top of it, this person has the goal to say that blacks are suffering climate-related anxiety. That's because you're catastrophizing climate. Like, maybe the government should prescribe fossil fuel.
Yeah, because they keep saying the world's going to end if we don't change it. So, yeah, that's definitely stressing people out. It's their fault. All these climate green idiots are the problem. They're the ones scaring everybody. There is actually no problem. The climate has been changing since the beginning of the earth.
Future. That's the solution to climate anxiety.
And to say one more, the real problem for climate change is all the nuclear bomb testings. There was millions and billions of BTUs of heat released whenever we tested bombs from the 40s or from the 40s and 50s all the way up, whenever they first figured it out, all the way up until like the late 70s. They were testing nuclear bombs. So now that we're not doing that anymore, the climate is slowly coming back down. And if it wasn't for climate change, any scientist, real scientist will tell you we'd eventually go into another ice age. There's been proven 4 ice ages in the past. So if there wasn't something to create global warming, the whole earth would freeze over again. These climate change idiots they're just idiots.
That is a very good prescription indeed. Now, here's some good news. This week, shareholders at oil giant Shell overwhelmingly rejected a climate change resolution filed by green activists, urging it to align its reduction targets to the Paris Climate Agreement. Alex, only 18% of shareholders backed this proposal. In March, we saw Shell weaken its 2030 carbon reduction target. They cited strong demand for gas. They're refocusing on more profitable operations like oil and gas. Seems to be a win for common sense, Alex.
I think this is a good development. And contrast this to, say, 2020, when we had a global pandemic, we had lockdowns that hurt most the oil and gas industry, particularly oil, because oil is the basis of modern transportation. And you had all these people saying I was wrong for saying that we have a fossil future, that we actually need more oil going forward. They're like, look, oil demand is low. It's not good to invest in oil. Now, why am I bringing this up in this context? Because the fact that oil stocks happen to be crashing because of those circumstances allowed a bunch of opportunistic ESG types to claim that disinvesting from oil was somehow a wise investment.
So they used the climate change grift to get into the stock market on the oil prices very low, and they made a shit ton of money. That's all this is it's a big money grift.
Thing. When in fact what happened is right after that, oil became one of the best performing sectors in the world as demand rebounded and then continued to increase to record levels where we are now, and we're still increasing. So what's happened is all these do-gooder ESG types who are thinking they would get rich being ESG are realizing that they're getting poor being ESG, and that if they have Shell or BP or all these other virtue signaling companies who've claimed that they want to go net zero, that they have to actually do that, it's going to crater their stock. So I'm glad that people are waking up to financial reality, and it's helping defang this really insidious ESG movement, because that not only hurts the oil companies, it most of all hurts the oil consumers, which is the world's 8 billion people who need cheap, reliable energy.
Well, how powerful is the ESG mob, the environmental, social and governance lobby? They seem to control a great deal of the money, Alex. Is their power weakening with the pandemic over and things getting back to normal?
There are signs of weakness, but we definitely cannot let up at all. I mean, you're seeing more and more people stand up to it. It used to be pretty lonely to stand up to it. Now there are a lot more people saying that it's bad. And in particular, the stuff I'm most interested in, the environmental side, the idea of rapidly eliminating fossil fuels, that is a global death sentence. You're increasingly having people recognize that to some extent. But unfortunately, the ESG movement has totally poisoned so many institutions and taken them over. And I'll just give an example of in the realm of AI, which is a new huge source of demand in the United States and around the world. A lot of these leading AI users like Microsoft and Facebook have been promoting ESG poison for years. And that's led to the shutdown of reliable power plants on our grid. This should sound familiar to Australians, and trying to replace them with unreliables. And now we don't have nearly enough electricity for AI. So you're seeing these institutions are not yet apologizing. I'll think it's great when Microsoft and Google and Facebook apologize for ruining our grid with ESG. Until then, I'm not complacent.
Well, our National Science Agency, the CSIRO, has published a report that insists that powering our country with nuclear energy is going to be far more expensive, nearly double the cost of doing it with renewables. $16 billion and 16 years is what it will apparently take to build a large-scale nuclear reactor. Is this true, Alex, or is this just another sign of the CSIRO being captured by the green ideology?
I want to draw people's attention to a weird kind of schizophrenia that you have going on here, which you often see, which is there's a total can't-do attitude with fossil fuels and in particular nuclear. So they act like, oh, it has to be incredibly expensive, even though, say, South Korea is able to do it cheaply. The United States used to be able to do it cheaply before we ruined it with bad regulations. So they have a total can't-do attitude with regard to nuclear, but with unreliable solar and wind, which have never powered any country anywhere without totally parasiting unreliable fossil fuels and nuclear, they have this infinite unicorn fantasy can-do attitude. And so one of the fallacies here is they're comparing unreliable power to reliable power. So that's, that's like comparing rotten oranges to apples. So they're not comparisons. What you need to happen is if you want to use solar and wind, the so-called renewables, those companies should figure out how to make them actually supply reliable electricity, provide the batteries themselves. Then what they see is it's just prohibitively expensive, but they're just comparing the cost of unreliable to reliable. So that's intellectually non-serious.
It is intellectually dishonest. You're absolutely right. Now, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has unveiled a $550 million strategy aimed at turning Australia into a world-leading battery manufacturer. This is another step, we are told, in firming up renewables and supporting the net zero transition. But can batteries ever provide that baseload power that a first world nation like Australia needs?
Well, they can, but they have to be made better. The batteries we have now aren't efficient enough. And don't get me wrong, I think that the green energy would be great. But until we get it better batteries and better solar panels, which eventually will be made, it's just not feasible. We have to rely on fossil fuels until we are capable of better batteries and better solar panels. And then eventually we can get off fossil fuels. But if you don't have a better solution, you can't try and replace something with something that don't work. So fossil fuels have to be burnt for probably another 10 or 15 years before everybody goes nuclear, and with the nuclear energy and the solar panels and batteries get better. Once we have better batteries, it'll be a lot easier to make the transition. Right now, which is not capable. Like he said, it's like comparing rotten apples to oranges.
Ever is a long time, but with the technology we currently have, they're nowhere near close. They're not even the best form of storage. What's called pump storage tends to be much cheaper. We just don't have any form of man-made storage right now that can accommodate the unreliability of solar and wind. So what happens is you build these battery facilities, and what happens is they'll say, oh, we have this many megawatts of batteries, and isn't that going to be great? But a megawatt of batteries is not the same as a megawatt of natural gas, because the megawatt of batteries usually lasts 4 hours maximum. So if it only lasts 4 hours, you need a lot more than 4 hours worth to be able to handle highs and lows of the sun and the wind over days, let alone weeks. So it's just this fake.
Well, in natural gas, it eventually runs out too.
It's just this fake stuff being added on to pretend that solar and wind are being reliable, but they're not reliable unless they can truly be self-sufficient without parasiting on the other stuff. So again, I say, Australian government, anyone who thinks they can make it work, have somebody figure out how to make a solution just using solar, wind, and batteries.
And don't think I'm not talking like I have no idea what I'm talking about. My house has been running off strictly solar. I have an off-grid solar house for over 2 years now. So I know all about the batteries and all about the solar panels and the inverters to run them. And I'm not guessing about the batteries. I own 12 batteries that run my house.
See how much that costs to provide reliable electricity with the same reliability of coal, natural gas, or nuclear. You'll be in for a rude awakening. But go ahead and try. But don't just steal everyone's money and restrict fossil fuels and promise the best, because there's no evidence it'll work at all.
And what about the elements that go into making these giant batteries? Where they come from, the supply chain, the reliance on China. Is that something that isn't given due consideration, Alex?
Well, in general, there's just, the negatives or challenges of solar and wind are never given due consideration. And then the negatives or challenges of fossil fuels are amplified, 100 times and just exaggerated beyond all proportion. So there's definitely this bias. I don't think it means fundamentally you can't produce batteries at a much larger scale. But if you look at near term, what people are proposing with these different net zero plans is just a totally unprecedented increase in mining in a very anti-mining global environment, particularly in the Western countries that used to be free, but now have many, many restrictions on mining. And this is a basic contradiction of the green movement, which says that to achieve, quote, green energy, we need to mine the world more than we ever have, which the green movement is going to oppose. And I think this confirms my thesis in Fossil Future. People can learn more about this at energytalkingpoints.com.
But everything that you get to make a battery comes out of the ground. So that's what he's saying. You need to mine more because of the lithium ion and everything to make a battery comes from the ground. It takes more mining to make batteries than it does to just mine the coal.
That the green movement is really an anti-energy movement. It pretends to support energy, but it really just hates human impact on Earth. And if you hate human impact, you hate energy, because energy allows us to impact the Earth to make our lives better.
Alex Epstein, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thanks, Rita.
All right, that was today's video. If you like it, like it. If you like it a lot, subscribe for more high-speed news. Till the next time, y'all take care and God bless you.